Hey there, AHC members. My name is Julie Hagney. I'm a hairdresser and educator, and welcome to a Reality Bites on training and apprentices. I'm presenting 10 minutes of helpful hacks for training apprentices in 2019. I would just like to disclose that I work for TAFE New South Wales, and I want to state that the views and opinions in this session are my own and don't necessarily represent my employer. Now, I added 2019 because that's what we need to focus on. What's happening right now is different to how we managed previous apprentice training, and it's especially different to the experiences we had as apprentices. So if you think you were this apprentice, you probably worked for this apprentice. I think you get what's going on, and it's still going on. Who are our apprentices? They're Gen Z, and they're different. And even if they're not under 20 years old, there's a likely chance that they respond like they're a Gen Z. So who are they? They're connected and highly externally stimulated. They're all about experience. Life and work are experience-based, and work is life. They believe they multitask really well, and they typically can be seen as absent-present. Now let's take that one, absent-present. They're so used to being stimulated and connected that you might even see them check their phone screen while they're escorting a client to the basin or on their way to mix a colour. Now, while we might tend to see this as being not present, they believe that they're just using up time that would otherwise have been wasted. So if they were any other generation, their idea of absence might be to not turn up at all. We could be blessed. There are also a lot of other things to say about them, but we've only got 10 minutes and I need to include housekeeping. So let's look at the big picture. Oh, and by the way, that was 8 seconds, which is the Generation Z concentration span. Too late, all over, try again next time. So it's participation time. So what I want you to do is experience like a Gen Z for this next slide. When you see the word, whatever the word is written on the screen, I want you to call it out and be real quick. So you ready? When you see a word, you're going to call it out. How'd you go? Did you say blue? Well, try these. How'd you go with that lot? Well, this is how Gen Z work. They just bring their experience. Is it deep-seated? Probably not. Throw them in the mix, move on. It's surface learning. They'll be better at it next time. Don't worry about it. Keep moving. Doesn't mean they're lazy or disrespectful. They just keep moving and they like it short and sharp. And look, you might also want to know that they prefer also to flip old mate Bloom on his head and start at the top with creating. No building from listening, understanding and mastering. They just like to try it right out, just get into the experience and work the rest out later. So that's very different to us. They're not like us and we have to work out ways to understand them. So we need to find ways to connect with them on their terms and to allow them to pay attention. We need to chunk it out and keep it real and relevant. Use micro-learning. Try a little bit at a time and often. And we need to work on shorter timelines with regular goals. Use their strengths. They're the future. That's for sure. So if you're interested in finding out a bit more about Gen Z, which is pretty intriguing, I've referenced heavily a lady called Claire Madden, who you might want to look up and find out a little bit more about them. She's pretty heavily into Gen Z and pretty on the nose as far as, on the mark, sorry, as far as I'm concerned. So if the generation of apprentices is different and they're different from 5 years ago or 15 years ago, and the process for apprentices is also different. So perhaps different to how you've previously experienced having an apprentice. One of the things I discovered at the AHC Industry Day in June was that there is some confusion about apprenticeships, the training package, acronyms, RTOs, all of that sort of stuff. So let's try to unpack some of the information. It's slightly different in every state, so I'll be as generic as possible. So these are the main moving parts in the apprenticeship model, and a traineeship is different and it's available in some states for the certificate 2 in Salon Assistant, but today I'm going to try to simply explain the traditional certificate 3 in hairdressing model. So the first step is to create a nice pairing between an apprentice and an employer. And often these apprentices are under 18. They may have a supervisor who is a parent or guardian, and an employer may select to have a supervisor representing them as well. If there is an employer representative, they must be a tradesperson and hold the qualification of the apprenticeship and not be an apprentice themselves. The employer or their representative will be the person who manages the apprentice, their training, and the communication with the other relevant parties. So once we have a nice relationship, we've found an apprentice, we've employed them. Then the employer arranges for an AASN of their choice to come and visit. They'll explain the apprenticeship arrangements and responsibilities to all parties. So there are 11 government-funded organisations nationally, Australian Apprenticeship Support Networks, and you can pick whichever one that you want to use. They'll also explain other apprentice opportunities like apprentice loans, concession travel, that sort of stuff, and they'll be the one who actually creates the indenture or the apprenticeship agreement between the employer and the apprentice. They're also the touch point for both parties regarding incentive payment dates into the future of the relationship as also. So they'll be with you moving forward. However, they'll create that arrangement or that agreement, and then they will notify state training and the nominated RTO. Now, in each state, the body responsible for the management of apprenticeship funding and the apprenticeship is called something different. So in New South Wales, it's called state training, and I'll refer to them as the state body from here on. So at this step, both the state body and the RTO start processing their responsibilities. So what is an RTO and what are they responsible for in this apprenticeship model? So an RTO is a registered training organisation. There are two types. They're public, which is TAFE, and also some universities, and there are private providers, and they're privately owned RTOs. They're all come under all the same rules. So RTOs are governed by a body called ASQA, and in apprenticeship, RTOs deliver training and assessment for an AQF qualification. That's an Australian qualifications framework, nationally recognised qualification, which is built around the training package. This slideshow has links in it, so if you'd like it, just leave a message in the below in the comments, and we'll post this for you so you can look up more of that information later. So RTOs have a heavy burden of compliance, and they must meet all the standards and requirements for evidence collection and volume of learning, quality of training, and the outcomes measured against the training package. So if you came to my RTO, you wouldn't get Julie Hagney training. You'd certainly get some personality and a relationship, but you definitely would be getting compliant AQF training. So at this stage, we now have the state body and the RTO notified, and now a training plan is developed. So an employer indenturing an apprentice is required to commence training with an RTO for the specific qualification pretty quickly after being employed. So check the time frame per state. The apprentice attendance for that formal training and assessment will vary by qualification and by state, but it's approximately equivalent to about 8 days a term or 32 days a year for 2 years for Certificate 3 in hairdressing. That's the formal training and assessment. That's very general, and the Australian Apprenticeship Service Network and the RTO and the employer will consult at the beginning when you're building that contract, and all the variables will be taken into consideration and a training plan will be created. So maybe your apprentice has some experience already, or they're bringing credit transfers from another qualification, something like that. Then the business of training and assessing starts. So the employer, the RTO, and the apprentice will work together for approximately 2 years for a Certificate 3 in hairdressing to train and assess to meet the AQF competencies in skills and knowledge, and the time frame will vary. The original training plan will be reviewed each 6 months with the competencies achieved agreed upon, and any changes in the training time frame will be made to that training plan each time that it's reviewed. Now, we get through all of that, and the training is now completed, and the training plan reflects the competencies as they are achieved. But as those final competencies are achieved, the RTO is then bound to notify the training body or the state body that the training is agreed upon with the employer and completed. That doesn't mean that the apprentice is automatically completing their apprenticeship. They're completing the qualification Certificate 3 in hairdressing. So the state body notify the employer that the formal training component or the qual is finished, is completed, but at this point the employer is responsible to respond to the state body and advise them of the continuance or the completion of the apprenticeship. So for example, the apprentice may be able to perform the skills at Certificate 3 level, but they may require more salon training hours to meet the commercial requirements of the business or the role of the tradesperson, for example, speed or maturity, more experience. So if you continue the apprenticeship past that initial qualification time of 2 years, then that's just to develop the apprentice further, and obviously that's ideal. There are many categories for apprentices for non-apprentice trained hairdressers in the award, and so that might be a helpful guide for employers for timeframes as well. So I hope this has been helpful in some way. It's a lot of information, and the information is live, so it might have even changed from me recording this and to uploading it to you. So my advice is to stay in great communication with all the parties continuously through the training of your apprentice. Apprentices are a huge investment. They're worth it. They're your business future and the future of our industry.